So how many of you have seen Apocalypse Now? Because I'd really recommend it. If you're into the sort of more brutal action movie stuff, want something a little on the edge, want something maybe a bit shocking at points, I'd recommend the fuck out of it. Now, there's a ton of different versions, so I can't tell you what to see. I think I saw the Redux cut in cinemas, and it quickly became one of my favourite films of all time. But this is a video about Spec Ops The Line, which, weird as it might be, and maybe even a little embarrassing for you guys who like to, pretend you see the, all-important movies, in some big list, as opposed to me who, just waits for the best time, which is, if they actually do get playing in a cinema near me. Yeah, I played Spec Ops before watching Apocalypse Now. I'm sorry, I am a pleb, I admit it. I did not watch Apocalypse Now first. But judging from the reaction to Spec Ops, I wonder how many people who praised that game even saw Apocalypse Now. Now, I'm going to admit, this is a my opinions video. I'm not interested in being one of those freaky weirdos who makes 5-hour long videos nitpicking over every single thing to try and explain why something is factually bad. I'm not going to do that. I just flat out don't particularly care for Spec Ops. I didn't particularly think it was all that good when I played it the first time, and I didn't play it a second, which is another thing I'm going to openly admit, because this is going to be a quick my opinions thing. I don't expect it to get massive views, and I'm not going to play for a game I wasn't huge on again just to recheck every single thing I say. If you think I'm factually wrong, feel free to comment, but please, make it actual factual wrongness. Like I say, Walker wears red when he wears a rainbow colours or whatever. Don't just complain because you disagree. Or maybe do, I don't know, some responses would be cool. In the end, this is a my opinion thing, and a lot of it's going to be going over other people's opinions and saying why I just fundamentally don't get on board with the idea that this was something anyone had to play. And to start off with, I want to bring up the initial reviews, because believe it or not, initial reviews for Spec Ops weren't actually all that great. Getting into that decent 7s on scores, with some pretty major sites giving it 6s and shit. Stuff which definitely doesn't communicate top 100 tier or something exceptional. That's kind of where I stand, because I'm not going to sit here and say Spec Ops is awful. It's not. Gameplay is middling, visuals are pretty good, story is, when looked at on its own, as sort of just compared to your average fucking shooter, is probably pretty good. If there's some shit which bugs me, but I'm not gonna say it's awful. What bugs me more is the increased attempt to reappraise this game as some kind of thing which can stand up to the likes of films like Apocalypse Now, or even as a particularly exceptional shooter. If you want to play an underrated cover shooter, there's Binary Domain, there's that 4th Dead to Rights, maybe even 50 Cent Bulletproof. No, Blood on the Sand. I'm not touching Bulletproof. I don't know. Maybe it's good, but I hear it's bad. So let's complain about Spec Ops for a bit.
6410, we're over the village right now. I think I see a vehicle down in the courtyard. I'm going to check it out. Well done, Hawks. Well done.
So, gameplay. Well, this isn't something a lot of people are that interested in, but there's this neat little system where if you perform an execution on someone, you get some extra ammo. That's kind of cool. It's kind of neat, I guess. I like my executions in my shooters. This gives you a cool little bonus. That's kind of where it goes as far as novelty goes. I guess there's some decent ragdoll in places. Nobody really cares about the story, let's be honest. It's all about the gameplay. Spec Ops is all about, people just love this shit. The fact that you got extra ammo when you perform like one of these melee kills. You know, like everyone was like, critics are wrong, this game is great, you gotta play Spec Ops because there's this cool system where you get like some extra ammo when you melee kill a guy. Fucking awesome game, you gotta okay, yeah, I'm gonna stop now, I'm gonna stop with this stupid gag. Spec Ops does have another novelty, like there's some bits where the sand kind of gets in your eyes, like there's a big sandstorm, and I think both Gears of War and Uncharted have also done that gimmick. I think that was like Spec Ops' big selling point initial of like, okay, sand can blow in front of you and make it hard to see, and no, I'm not bothered to find some clips to show that. Let's talk about the re-evaluation of Spec Ops. Let's talk about that, and then I'll go on to the story.
I thought we were over the whole modern warfare thing. It had its fun for a while, systematically abusing the word realistic, but then Spec Ops The Line came along and showed us what a bunch of violent, paranoid, glory boy twats the whole genre was making us all look like. You were supposed to slink off in shame. Nanny caught you with your hand in the cookie jar. You don't just continue eating the cookies. But no, Warfighter's down with everything that makes modern shooters fucking
This is where I feel 90% of the Spec Ops praise comes from, an intense distaste for the military shooter genre, and I'm not going to tell people they can't like these games or can't dislike them. I'm just going to say that Spec Ops is way more in common with them than people like to act, and while a lot of people argue this is part of a point, I want to make the case that this is definitely not an Apocalypse Now of gaming, because it's not just that the gameplay is generic, it's that the story is generic. What do I mean by that? Well, Spec Ops plot isn't the plot of Apocalypse Now, it's every fucking trope you would expect in a lot of your average military shooters. See, people like to hype their average military shooter as some sort of US is dominant, patriotic, good old boys sort of thing, which doesn't really exist, or at least doesn't exist in number. Spec Ops is way more in common with your average Call of Duty than people like to think. From its goofy twists, like, you know, the main villain existing in the main character's head, that wasn't in Apocalypse Now. Yeah. We're into spoilers at this point. Sorry if you hadn't played Spec Ops. So here's my major beef. Spec Ops is kind of silly and kind of has more in common with your average generic military shooter than people like to think. Spec Ops is not Apocalypse Now. It's kind of a weird conspiracy story about a plan to starve all of Dubai, so literally everybody in the city dies, along with a main villain. That's the Fight Club twist. You know, the sort of thing you'd expect from something like Manhunt 2. Sorry to spoil Manhunt 2. And Call of Duty. Sorry to spoil, but one of the Call of Duties also did that twist. You know, it's a weird mish of silly, over-the-top action with characters falling like multiple meters and just grabbing the side of buildings and surviving. It's goofy ragdoll animations mixed with attempts at actual, like, brutality. It is, in many ways, way more in common with your average generic war shooter than people like to make out. Sorry, but for average COD, isn't this ultra-patriotic US is dominant? Sure, it's not quite as dark as Spec Ops, but it's not that far off, which is my issue. Spec Ops isn't even set in a real conflict, like your average military shooter. It is not Heart of fucking Darkness. It is not fucking Apocalypse Now. So, since we're fully into spoilers now, it's time to talk about the right phosphorus scene. Because this is the big one. And I want to explain why it didn't really work with me, but I also want to briefly defend it also. A lot of the time when people say they don't like Spec Ops, they go with this ridiculously stupid fucking argument that Spec Ops is bad because it makes you do bad things, and if it makes you do bad things, then the game is bad because you can't do a bad thing in a game. They should offer you choice. Choice. I love choice. I love choice. I wish every movie had a fucking choice. I wish everything was a choice, because even if it's not a movie, every game should be a choice. And fuck you, shut the fuck up, sit in the back, sit in your fucking paddling pool, fuck off. I'm sick of this stupid fucking argument. Okay? If Shadow of the Colossus, yeah, it's bad because it doesn't give you a choice. It should give you a different choice, which gives you a happy, like, fuck off. And no one actually says that, because most people don't actually believe that shit. They're just looking for the cheapest fucking thing to hang around their neck and say, hey, look, I've beaten Spec Ops, I've proven how it's bad, it doesn't give you a choice. Spec Ops doesn't need to give you a choice. Giving you some lame extra happy ending would have been lame. It would have been a lame extra happy ending, it can fuck off. That said, choice can kinda be a problem, just not in how people are describing it. So let's talk about the right phosphorus scene. Okay, here's why it didn't work for me. Number one, they make it a little too fucking obvious. Now in a couple of seconds you're going to see a line already hinting to you that something bad is probably going to happen. Give it a sec.
Army, give or take. Oh shit, how we get through this? This might help. Right, set it up. You're fucking kidding, right? That's white phosphorus. Yeah, I know what it is. You've seen what this shit does. You know we can't have a choice, Hugo. There's always a choice. No, there's really not.
Now, some might see that as a great meta moment. For me, it was kind of a moment where it's basically telling you, yeah, something bad's gonna happen.
Okay, prepare to fight.
Now, I was fortunate enough to manage to not spoil myself for any of the plot outside of the fact that you fought Americans, which to me wasn't a huge shock because, believe it or not, killing American soldiers is not that unusual. It's not really a big shock to me. Now, I'm not saying this scene couldn't have worked better, I just sort of think it doesn't work as it is, and a lot of that's because one, it makes it obvious. Two, yeah, you don't have a choice, but the issue is how you don't have a choice. Had they maybe not made it so clear of what's going to happen by basically refusing to let you exit this sequence until you bomb the civilians, otherwise this just goes on forever, it might have worked a little better. As it did, it just didn't work for me because of that. You know, I kind of guessed what was going to happen because, like I've said, it's, you know, you doing a bad thing and it being bad is not completely out of field for your average military shooter. It's not as shocking as people like to make out. And yeah, it's not that you don't have a choice. I mean, honestly, had they made the sequence a cutscene, it might have honestly worked a little better because I wouldn't be awkwardly trying to exit the aim thing to let me just shoot the guy who's placed awkwardly by the civilians to ensure you can actually get past this section until you do it. There we go. That's why it didn't really work for me. Which means we gotta get on to the loading screens now. So, yeah, these are something people have praised a crazy amount, and to me they just felt cheesy. Like, they're fourth rule breaks, obviously, and they're meant to address the player, but my response was, I don't really care. You know, you're not shocking me. Which is where we get into the big thing, that idea that Spec Ops is good because it's morally good, which I don't know, really? Is that the takeaway? Because it's not like Spec Ops is something that couldn't be enjoyed as a low tier COD game. It really could be. And I sort of think this is the core reason Spec Ops gets so much of a weird praise from certain people, the idea that it confronts the COD bro, and the COD bro sees himself as a monster when he sees these cheesy fucking messages on loading screens telling him, you know, do you feel like a hero? As if military shooters haven't been full of goofy plot twists and all this shit. Like, I'm sorry, to me this just isn't a impressive moral, it's not a shock. I feel very little. If this sort of message came up during Apocalypse Now in the cinema, I'd have laughed. I just don't see the strength in this. To me, Apocalypse Now, it dropped the far stronger bomb. Spec Ops is right phosphorus, not so much. And this goofy attempt to correlate the events of the video game with some sort of real sort of comparison to actual government violence just comes across as goofy. I'm sorry, it came across as silly to me. So, Spec Ops 2 probably isn't happening. The creator doesn't want to do it. It seems like not a lot of people are interested. There are now rumours about one. So what would I like to see? Well, first of all, have the balls to set it during a real conflict. Don't make up some fake one. Set it in Afghanistan, set it in Iraq, set it in somewhere else, but don't make something up, because that's fucking pussy shit. Up the level of violence significantly. Allow it to be as dark and nasty as you want. Like, fucking put a rape minigame if you must. But go stronger, because to me, this was kind of weak shit.